Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today, I'm always with Hairylawn.
What's up?
So today, we're going to talk about Shin Megami Tensei V. But I haven't played it. You have. So we're basically kind of doing like interview kind of type of questions, right?
Yeah,
I'll
something like that.
I'll basically just ask you the questions of, just general questions of the game, and you answer because you pretty much finished it recently, right?
Yeah, quite literally last week.
All right, so it's pretty fresh in his mind. So I guess I'll get started. Well, how does it differ from Persona?
So, Shin Megami Tensei, or SMT for short, is actually considered the quote-unquote mainline series of Atlas, which is the publishing parent company, because Persona is a spin-off. However, SMT is actually a part of the bigger Mega 10 Megami Tensei series, which include things like Digital Devil Saga, Devil Survivor, Devil Summoner, etc., etc. Devil Summoner, I just mentioned, as we have the Raito versus King Abaddon remaster coming out quite soon, but I digress. SMT is generally more about summoning demons to do your bidding, as opposed to Persona, where you summon those quote-unquote same monsters or demons from your soul. So the demons themselves, you can have up to 4 or 3 demons, depending on which game you're playing, and then you have a protagonist. And a lot of the things that carry over from SMT into Persona is that the weakness, extortion, and then like gaining extra turns is a very SMT Mega 10 concept. Exploiting weaknesses to get more turns is basically the bread and butter of Atlas games. But Megami Tensei takes it to a point where you can actually do things like getting more turns, and that's just basic combat stuff. In terms of story and difficulty, generally the SMT games are considered harder than the Persona games. If you compare them like apples to apples, as opposed to just one-on-one difficulty comparison. But one thing that people like to consider Shin Megami Tensei as is, think of it as the Dark Souls of JRPGs. They're known to be difficult, and people thrive off of it. I thrived off of it. I recently completed SMT V Vengeance, which is actually kind of like the updated version, kind of like how Persona has P5 Royal, Persona 3 Fez, or Persona 4 Golden. It's an updated re-release of the game. This one introduces a whole new storyline and a whole new characters, and completely diverges from the main vanilla game, and also a lot of things like quality of life and super bosses, etc., etc. So when I played Vengeance, I actually decided to do the new route and had the new character. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I had started it, put it down because it was getting difficult, and then I picked it back up recently, probably about 2-3 weeks ago, and then just grinded it nonstop going through the game. And right now I'm going through the game another time. This time I'm doing the vanilla storyline, which is called the Canon of Creation. The newer one for exclusive to the re-release game version is called the Canon of Vengeance. And I won't spoil it for anyone, but there are 6 different endings, and there are certain requirements that you do, and that's very common across not only Persona but especially the SMT games. So replays through the story are essentially a must if you want to 100% and or see the endings for yourself.
Okay. For SMT, is it the game more like story driven, or is it more like action gameplay?
I think it's very much story driven. There's lots of like beats where the action is pretty, I don't want to say monotonous, but it does get to a point where it just get kind of old, and that just comes with playing a game over and over again. But it's very much story driven. But you could blitz through the story if you'd like. I think I'm about maybe 50-60% of the current continuity. However, that's just because I was like skipping cutscenes and all that. The cutscenes, they're fully animated, fully voiced, etc., etc. But it's pretty story driven, I would say. But there's a lot of side content that you can do. So your first playthrough could take hours. My first playthrough took over 50 hours, which is pretty common for JRPG playthrough, I would expect.
And since when you play these games, I know you're in Shin Megami Tensei 5. I mean, you can play these games out of order, right?
Yeah, you can. Each one has its own story. There is some continuity, but they're more like Easter eggs and callbacks. Most of the stories are isolated to their own continuity, unless otherwise specified. For example, Shin Megami Tensei 4 and then SMT 4 Apocalypse, those are direct. That's a direct sequel to the SMT 4 game.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you could really start anywhere. Most people, like Persona, they'll start at 3
Hmm.
because that's where a lot of the gameplay improvement and visual improvements have started. I started 3, I just forgot to finish it.
Hmm.
So, like, I went back through 5 because it was the most recent one. I'm planning on playing the others as well. I've started 4, I need to finish 4 as well. But 1 and 2 are kind of left to the sidelines, much like how it is in the Persona side.
And I guess in the gameplay wise, was the mechanics hard to learn? Was it easy to use?
I'll say it, I'll simplify with this. Easy to pick up, hard to master. Because it boils down to essentially learning how to mix and match certain weaknesses and resistances on your demons, which ones to use for each scenario. For a casual playthrough, you can just find your niche team and just blitz through the story before the harder bosses like challenge modes or secret bosses and all that. You kind of have to develop a strategy. And a lot of the times that boils down to a lot of extra grinding to get the perfect setup. So I end up looking up a lot of guides. I did a whole bunch of research on how to do certain boss fights, and that's helped with my own knowledge of how to play the game as well.
What's the story behind it? What is SMT about?
Well, I'll keep it as spoiler free as possible because I do genuinely recommend this game for anyone to play it. Essentially, the protagonist is quite literally a nobody. It takes place in Tokyo, then the Tokyo netherworld where all these demons are, and you become a being called a Nahobino, which is essentially a being that is candidate for godship, godhood. And your role is to play through the game and essentially ascend that throne to godhood and make the world in your image. The two different canons alongside their respective endings in each canon determine how the end of the story play out and what kind of god you become. You are not the only one that's like fighting for the crown, if you will. So you'll meet a lot of like adversaries, rivals, etc., etc.
What stood out to you the most?
Um, would you be saying that before just trying into, or just like even after finishing it?
Before, like, what was your, I guess, thoughts going into it, and what's your thoughts after finishing it?
Going into it, to be fair, I was a pretty much a just pure Persona fan.
Hmm.
However, because I was keeping up with Atlas and the whole company as a whole, I saw the game. It caught my attention. I loved like I liked the character designs quite a bit, and I liked the gameplay. And I thought, I've been meaning to get into SMT anyway, so why not start here? And afterwards, I'm glad I started it. I'm glad this was my first one because I've heard at least the first one I finished because the other ones were a little bit more difficult by comparison. But I plan to go through those and play it on hard mode because I hate myself. I also just want to have that sense of achievement. Part of me, and this is just my personality, I like to play games on harder difficulties and try to overcome it just because there's just that rewarding part because sometimes normal or casual is just way too easy, but I don't want an experience where it just feels nigh impossible. So I need a good balance, and like hard seems to be a good balance. Honestly, now that I've played this game, I wish the installment of the game of the series or any future Atlas games take a lot of the quality of life that they've gathered over the years and implement them because they actually kind of already did that with Metaphor. Refantasio. I'll do a Metaphor. Refantasio was very much felt like a Mega 10 Megami Tensei game in its own right. The fact that you can generate more turns, exploit weaknesses to get more turns, turn icons, things like that. So I highly recommend this game to anyone who loves the Persona series or just that kind of style of JRPG.
For me, I don't really care much about the, action gameplay they have. I'm more invested into the story of how Persona 5 had just a great storytelling about stealing people's hearts. SMT 5 had the same thing.
I think so. There's a lot of story beats that like kind of catch you off guard. The story is great. It's not like mind blowing, but it does throw you for a loop. And this might be just being my own biases, but right now I think I have to say I enjoyed the canon of Vengeance, which is the Vengeance exclusive storyline compared to the canon creation, but I'll probably make a full opinion once I actually finish the canon of creation myself. But it is very much story driven, and the side characters, some of them leave a lot to be desired. Some of them feel a little flat, one dimensional, but you can't make everyone a perfect character.
I see. How does the atmosphere feel in SMT5 compared to the Persona series?
Apocalyptic. Very much apocalyptic. Persona, at the very least, the three quote unquote modern ones are very much high school simulator. And then the first two are also much more story driven as opposed to just say like visual novel / dating sim esque as the 3, 4, 5 are. SMT as a whole, you're in a apocalyptic setting. You find out the reason why it's happened, or you're living in the aftermath and kind of like navigating this post-apocalyptic world. So the stakes are a lot higher in SMT, I think, in a comparison to Persona.
I see. When you recommend this game to somebody, let's say your friend, right? Would you, since this game doesn't really have an order in it, would you recommend them to go to SMT5 right away? What game would you recommend for them to start to have a good base of understanding?
I'd say I would want them to do 5 because of all the quality of life. And the reason why is because if they end up enjoying the game themselves, I think they would find an interest in trying the older games. Not to mention, in the SMT5 Vengeance, they have easier difficulties. There's a safety difficulty, casual, normal, hard, and then a secret higher tier difficulty as well. And I think it's a good starting point for people just because they can kind of just go through the game, learn the mechanics, and get, garner an interest. And if it's not for them, it's not for them. But it's a good starting point because of how recent it is as well.
Okay. And how long did you take to finish this game? Because I know JRPGs games can be very, very long.
First playthrough about 50 hours, but I did do certain quest lines. I looked up a lot of guides because I couldn't be bothered to go and memorize where everything is because the map exploration has a lot of verticality and it's not like straightforward. You go through some hoops and loops to get where you need to be. Yeah, about 50 hours, and my current playthrough of the second run is about 8-9 hours. I'm kind of like blitzing through each fight because of how easy it is, because I want to see all the endings.
If I were to ask you, hey, out of between Persona series and SMT, what's a good game to start off with if I want to get into JRPG between the two?
Between those two?
Yes, those two, yes.
Realistically, if you're interested in JRPGs and want to get into it, I would start with Persona because of the easier difficulty, and the learning curve is it's not as steep of a learning curve as opposed to an SMT. And as for the game itself that you should start with, I would probably tell someone to start with Persona 4.
Okay.
Because 3 has the Tartarus grind that a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with. I thought it was okay. It wasn't my favorite, and then Mementos in Persona 5 exists as well. Persona 4, you can just play through the game somewhat at your own pace and just experience the gameplay and the story then and there. Especially the quote-unquote rumor Persona 4 remake coming out in the near future. We don't know if it's going to be announced officially or that, but let's see how they remake our investigation team.
Well, I guess that's all my questions for SMT5. We've done a lot of questions, but yeah, I really enjoyed the questions. I know you just finished the game. I know you had fun. I've seen you play the game. and I've always compared it to Persona, probably the only, I guess, JRPG game I can think of. Do you think these questions we've asked, what these questions you've answered, do you think it'll be a good, like, I guess, starter for people to get into the game?
I think so. I do highly encourage people to do a bit of their own research with caution. You don't want to get spoiled. But find out if this game is truly for you. I kind of went in somewhat blind, but I saw the trailers early on, and back in the day, back in like 2020, because the game originally released back in 21, but the trailers started coming out like tail end of the 2010s, early 2020s. So I'd say look into it. And you know what? Even without doing research, I recommend just trying it out. And I don't think you can go wrong with it. There's loads of content, and I don't think you will regret it.
I see. Well, thanks for answering all my questions. That's all I have for you. Do you want to say any final words before I end it?
Nope.
All right, that was Hairylawn. Well, guys, if you enjoyed this video and these questions helped you probably just look at the game, review it a little bit, it's great. But with that, we'll see you guys later.
See you guys.
Take care.